Car repossessions are hitting the market at an alarming rate, and buyers are going underwater. People are bankrupt. People are even moving to the street.
And for some people, their solution has been sleeping outside, but they might not be able to for much longer. The Supreme Court agreed to review a case out of Oregon, which would decide if cities can punish residents for sleeping outside.
Things are getting dire, and we've never seen record numbers like this.
His agency still conducts the count since it's a federal requirement, but they've also invested resources to look at what homelessness is like there over the entire year.
There's a crisis here that most people don't really want to see. There are more homeless people in Toronto than ever before.
23% increase in the first half of 2024 is what we're seeing. Car repossessions. People can't make their payments. We're up 14% over pre-pandemic numbers, and yet people continue to buy. What's going on? Well, back in 2020, when the pandemic hit, everybody locked down, everybody sat down, and people didn't do anything. To stimulate the economy, the government started throwing handouts, and all kinds of money came into the buyers. Buyers got into new cars, trucks like this, and you see all kinds of inventory like this, because a lot of dealers like Dodge, Jeep, Stellantis, and a lot of other manufacturers started to see what the writing on the wall was. The government was throwing money out, and people were spending it, and that's what started to happen. But quickly, in 2022, we saw a quick knee-jerk response to the market change. And once the money started hitting people's accounts, people would go out and buy these brand new trucks and cars and SUVs like this because seemed like free money at the time, and there was no end date to when this pandemic would actually end. So people were just going out spending their easily come money by the government on vehicles like this or any one of these vehicles. Then naturally the supply and demand kicks in strong, and we started to see a low inventory. That's right, we start to see gaps in the inventory. You start to see some vehicles for sale, and then on the other hand, you start to see many go away, and there was less selection. It actually got to the point where there was very little selection. People started to fight and overbid for a lot of these vehicles. The manufacturers quickly figured it out and started jacking prices up because people were willing to pay it. If you didn't want to buy it, Johnny on the spot behind you did, and so that drove prices up drastically. Vehicles like this that once were $35,000, all of a sudden today are going for about $80,000. It was such a weird and wacky time. Vehicles like the Jeep Grand Cherokee like this in upper trim levels, you would never even dream of seeing vehicles like this up near $100,000, and yet today you could find quite easily a lot of Jeep products, a lot of the upscale Jeeps going for price tags over $100,000, especially out the door. You're $110,000, $115,000 for a lot of these vehicles now, reserve models for example. And then the dealers also figured out, instead of producing the limited number of vehicles because the chip shortages, they started producing far less of these smaller economical SUVs like this. And even the base Cherokee was even punted because it didn't have the margins in it. Rather, these manufacturers started producing more of their high-level trim vehicles because there's much more profit margin in these. They were getting smart. But go figure, with a lot of buying, up goes inflation. Inflation spiked, and of course, what does the government do? The reserves of US, Canada, they respond by increasing interest rates, and that's what happened in 2022. We saw a massive spike in the spring of 22 of interest rates, but people continued to buy. And of course, vehicle prices were on the rise, interest rates were on the rise, and it was a perfect storm for people starting to get in over their head. And then what do you think happens with high interest rates? And it actually took buyers a significant amount of time to figure out the fact that high interest rates with overpriced vehicles means a recipe for disaster. That means you're underwater, negative equity. So if you go to trade in your vehicle like this in short order, you're likely going to find yourself owing the bank a lot more money than that vehicle is actually worth. Take a look at Black Book value of these vehicles. Understand how bad certain vehicles can really depreciate. That is the toll it's taking on a lot of car buyers. And car buyers, all they're doing, a lot of people losing work. There's obviously job shortages is on the rise. And even though housing increases and vehicle sales seem to be up, the fact remains is there's a very small niche of people that can comfortably afford a lot of these vehicles, and rising interest rates are not helping. I mean, here we have some examples of some repossessions recently just popped in because people could not keep up with the payments. Here we have a little Nissan, probably more likely going to be a subprime buyer buying this Nissan Qashqai here. And we look over here, we have a Buick Enclave. This vehicle here clearly a little bit neglected. We've got neglect there, we've got neglect there. Look at this, car's been run hard, going through the mud, and clearly not the best condition, but this vehicle's been used and abused. A lot of people end up running their vehicles into the ground because they know they're going to be repossessed. And unfortunately, during that government handout, where people should have actually been buying vehicles like this they can actually afford because they were unemployed and governments were just throwing money out, you had to know that it was coming to an end. Rather that, people were buying vehicles like this. getting way in over their head, spending a lot of money on a new 4x4, throwing accessories like these big fancy rims, of course, big mud guards, tonneau covers. They don't know where the money was going to come from in the next month. And that's the problem people are in now. They're out of money, the government stopped paying, and the government actually wants a lot of that money back. The worst part is when you hear dealers offer 0% today, that's all a lie. 0%, yes, but that means they're gonna offset that with the cost, the cash price of that vehicle. So don't be snookered, because the average new car finance rate currently is still 7.3%. It's always based on the Reserve or the Bank of Canada rates. And as well, used vehicles like this one here are currently around averaging 11.5%. So if you're seeing 0%, it's simply not true, because it's always based on what the banks are offering. So while a lot of people are clearly thriving and can easily afford that brand new GMC Sierra right there, unfortunately far less people can, and there's way too many people that are driving those Sierras and yet should only be buying something like this. Because here's another repossession, obviously rusted out, rotted out, quite used and abused. At least they got the life out of it. Look, the bumper's even coming off, clearly a sign that it didn't enjoy a happy life at the end of its road. And to continue add to this, car prices have never been so high. With the average monthly payment on a new vehicle like this, $750. With the average used car payment like this, people are still paying about $5.5. Remember, there is about 11 or 12% of the population that are paying over $1,000 a month. 11, 12, we're even hearing $1,800 a month for some vehicles, and people that clearly can't even afford it. So because people wanted to spend all that money, that easy government handout money, during the pandemic back in 2022, it just seemed so easy. But instead of doing that, now people have made that choice to buy that new vehicle, and unfortunately 23% increase in the rising repossession rate here in the first half of 2024. Why is it all of a sudden so bad? Well, do the math. 2022, 23, and 24. Now we're at the end of the road where we're talking about the end of loan terms, lease terms, which is also the term where a lot of people start trading their vehicles in and going for that next vehicle. And on top of it, the government is now, for example, like CERB in Canada and the US are looking for some of that money back, and they're given some forgiveness back in 2020 and 21. Forgiveness is over, my friend, and people are starting to suffer. The cost of living crisis is real, and the repossession crisis is getting ugly. And now the repossession crisis is getting even worse. We're seeing people finding any opportunity to live in bush, live under a dunnage, just so they can stay warm or sheltered at nighttime. Because I even personally know somebody that literally, his wife is leaving him. He's told me he lost his truck 3 months ago, his job 4 months ago, and now unfortunately he says he has nowhere to go. It's probably going to be on the street for a short period of time. He believes that, hey, hopefully he can get through this, and we keep our fingers crossed for Brad, buddy. We're all thinking about you. Hey, we know times are tough.
There's so many different types of homeless people in this city. People that fall in hard times, get divorced, lose their jobs, get a work injury. It's not just the bums you see on the street. We're everywhere.
And there's certain vehicles that are even worse. So people that had to get those hot new technologically advanced vehicles, some of the electric vehicles are taking the biggest hits. Tesla, for example, we know that Elon's been slashing prices left, right, and center just to stay competitive with Ford. And back in 2022, people were buying vehicles like this. Who needs something like this? I mean, it sure looks pretty. It's got all the extra decals on it, large tires. Look at the suspension work on this. This thing is absolutely large and in charge. We're talking a truck that costs over $250,000 to manufacture, but it's people that were buying a lot of these are suffering the fate of repossessions. So these high prices for brand new vehicles that have finally gotten out of control and pushed people to a point where they finally broke, they can't pay for it. Now we're seeing the used car prices go up to a point where they're paying for a 5-year-old used vehicle more than a brand new vehicle was of the same type merely 5 years ago. But great reliable vehicles like this little Toyota RAV4 is always going to be an easy sell and command top dollar. Even a little Chevy like this, not a high quality vehicle, but people are buying them because they're affordable. Same thing right here. We have a little Encore by Buick. People are buying vehicles like this because they can. You know, a lot of people are looking for cheap deals. Right here we have a little Mazda as well, Mazda 3, a very popular and reliable option for a lot of people, and another Mazda SUV right here. And even older vehicles like Honda Civics. We too bought a 2012 Civic for our daughter because it's ultra reliable and it's very affordable. But those prices are going up too, so even people that can't afford new are almost getting to the point where they can't afford used. But beautiful trucks like this GMC Denali, this is clearly here is an HD, has the big tow hitch. We obviously have a spray and liner, and I definitely like the looks. They got the rear slider in there, chrome details, drop down step bar here, big heavy duty mirrors, and look, with the Duramax 6.6 liter liter. This is absolutely gorgeous truck with lots of chrome. Love the new intake on these. But these vehicles have nowhere to go but down in terms of overall value. Once you start putting some miles on a pickup truck, they go down. That's where the negative equity and depreciation absolutely destroys these vehicles. Even though trucks are still a strong holder, they depreciate like no other. And what are we looking at here? The sticker, we see a 24, yeah, there we are, $120,000 for this diesel single rear wheel pickup truck. And we know what the future holds for vehicles like the GMC Terrain like this. These are not cheap brand new. Used car market, you could find 6 or 7 year old versions of these types of vehicles going for single digit thousands of dollars. These are more or less a beater vehicle, very entry level. So how much do they cost brand new? Well, let's take a look. At least they're putting nice polished black wheels on there. I like the mirror, definitely feels Corvette-ish. And look, nice touch here. Of course, you don't get a sunroof on there. You do get a nice roof rack. And I do like the looks of this SLE as we see right there. This is the GMC Terrain all-wheel drive. Yeah, you get all the amenities. It's a fairly well-spec'd vehicle. I will say you just get fabric, and more plastic. And here we have a 24 Terrain SLE all-wheel drive, a few basic options. It's not a well-spec'd, kind of mid-level, I would say. And look, it's honestly all in $40,000, $40,305 to be exact. And that's before extras. You want to put on extra all-weather mats. You want to put paint protection film so you don't get rocks all over the front end and at least somewhat protect your investment. Not that vehicles are a good investment, because they're not. So you can literally see this vehicle in 5 years go from $40,000 down to probably $8,000 or $9,000. Not a good investment, and certainly depreciation hurts that. As does negative equity, absolutely kicks that one in the rump. So if somebody's looking to get out of that vehicle on a trade, you can just literally see the black book's going to be a hard, wet slap across the face telling them, yeah, forget about it. You're only worth 20 grand, but you still owe 35. It doesn't feel like a good place to be. And that's the conundrum that a lot of people are facing. That's why repossessions are on the rise. People are losing their jobs. They're trying to trade up, trade down, trying to get out of some of their debt. And of course, we know credit card debt, school debt, all of that debt is rising. Cost of inflation is on the rise. Housing costs is going up, and insurance for every one of these vehicles is going up at an alarming rate. Who can afford to drive anymore? And some of the vehicles that have lost the biggest amount of value, or in other words, added negative equity to the buyers, are a lot of electric vehicles. We know already GM, Ford, they're already scaling back on the production of some of their electric vehicles. Here we have the Hummer EV for $140,000. I can't blame them. Who's buying these? Not a lot of people I see. I've seen one on the road so far. They're very, very expensive vehicles. And on the used car market, they're even worse. Nobody seems to be buying the used cars. We know Tesla have been scaling back the sales, the brand new sales prices, because they're competing with Ford and the Mustang Mach-E, and they're both back and forth trading punches, and they're both racing to the bottom. But unfortunately, what that means is the people that are stuck buying those new on the used car market, there's almost no value, so they've lost all equity in that vehicle. And that's right, some electrical vehicles, including Teslas, are some of the hardest losers in the industry. So people that bought into them 2-3 years ago have lost probably 60 or 70 or 80% of their value, depending on the model and the year. But all electric vehicles have been suffering a brutal demise on overall depreciation, which adds to that negative equity and a huge risk for repossessions. But people are also starting to realize with buying electric vehicles the much higher increased level of insurance costs. And so because of changing batteries, tires, damage to the bodywork, sometimes writes a lot of these vehicles off, because the sensitivity to electrics and the fire potential means a lot of the vehicles are driving insurance costs through the roof, and people don't realize it until they get into it. So now they get an electric vehicle, and then up goes the insurance costs, up goes everything other than oil changes, about the only thing they're saving. And that's also why rental company Hertz has decided to dump more than half of their Model 3 fleet, because repair costs, insurance costs, damage, and you name it, they just can't afford to keep them on the lot, and they're replacing a lot of those with ICEs. So sadly, the cost of living crisis is kicking everybody's butt, and even worse, the repossession crisis is on the rise, spiking, and we've never seen this type of number. We're also seeing subprime borrowers to the tune of 6% losing their vehicles and waving bye-bye. But with that said, electric vehicles, definitely want to check out what's going on there. What's GM saying about their electric vehicle market, and as well, what's going on there with Ford. Hope to see each and every one in the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.